Over the years, people have found downright crazy things in Minecraft, from giant cacti to seeds with no end islands. But have you ever wondered what the limits of Minecraft world generation are? By that I mean occurrences that are theoretically possible to naturally generate, but are so incredibly rare that they'll most likely never be found. So, let's start with the rarest tree. In October of 2021, a Discord user by the name of Encolier made an interesting discovery. He analyzed the code for fungus trees in the Nether, and he found that it's possible for every single block on the tree to be a shroom light. Most fungus trees already do have shroom lights on them, but it gets exponentially less likely that more shroom lights will generate on the same tree. According to Encolier, this tree is theoretically possible to randomly generate in Minecraft, but it's so rare that even the most experienced seed finders don't seriously believe that it can be found. The reason is, this tree has a 1 out of 1.19 times 10 to the power of 468 chance of generating. That means that you have a 0.468 zeros 516 chance of randomly finding this in your world. And what's insane is, there aren't even enough seeds in Minecraft for this to have a feasible chance of existing. For reference, the number of atoms in the observable universe is estimated to be about 10 to the power of 80. So there are literally less atoms in the universe than the chances of this tree generating. But despite this, it's impossible to truly know whether this tree exists or not, as you'd need to search through quintillions of seeds to make sure. But the only thing for certain is that this tree pushes Minecraft's world generation to its very limits. But what if I told you there's a chance for something even rarer to happen in Minecraft? We all know that there's a 1 in a trillion chance for an end portal to be naturally completed, and seed finders have found many such seeds over the last few years. But every Minecraft world has 128 end portals, so theoretically it is possible for every single one of those portals to be fully completed on a single world. But the chance of this occurring is a 1 out of 10 to the power of 1536 chance. This is so rare that it makes even the rarest tree look common. And keep in mind that no one's even found a seed with 2 completed end portals in the same world, let alone 128 completed portals. So while it's theoretically possible for a world like that to exist, the chances of it happening are rarer than anything that's ever happened in human history. But again, we can't even confirm whether a world like that exists or not due to the sheer number of seeds across every Minecraft version. But it is theoretically possible. Now let's move on to the next limit of world generation, which is the highest naturally generated point in Minecraft. On the surface, this may seem simple. Minecraft worlds are 320 blocks tall from ground level, so you're probably thinking that the highest place in Minecraft is a mountain that generates up to that height. But there's something interesting about this limit. While you can build up to 320 blocks, for some reason Minecraft's natural terrain generation can only reach up to the old 256 block limit. That means that the highest natural point in Minecraft should be a mountain that reaches 256 blocks, right? Well, some seed finders have managed to find seeds with natural terrain that goes over that limit, but the chance of this happening is incredibly slim. One way this can happen is if a structure generates at Y256. For example, a seed finder called M33 Galaxy found this seed, which has a pillager outpost that generated at Y256, so its height reaches Y276. This is currently the highest natural point that's ever been discovered in Minecraft. However, this can be even taller, with jungle trees and mansions, which might be able to reach to Y290. However, another seed finder called Damduck found a theoretical way for natural terrain to reach up to 300 or even 310 blocks in vanilla Minecraft. The only way that this can ever happen is through an extremely tiny chance for the biggest ice spike possible to generate at Y256. However, the chance for an ice spike's biome to generate at such extreme heights is almost impossible, and on top of that, you'd need the perfect placement of a giant ice spike as well. The closest Damducks come to finding a seed like this is this one, with a small ice spike that reaches to Y256. Also, it's not exactly known how tall ice spikes can generate to, but the tallest ones have been recorded at over 50 blocks in height. So this theoretical scenario is the only way that natural terrain generation can ever reach over Y300 in Minecraft. No one knows exactly how rare this occurrence is, but seeing as seed finders haven't been able to find it, it may be too rare to exist. Now, the next limit of Minecraft is the tallest sugarcane that can exist. Now, we all know that sugarcane can naturally generate up to 4 blocks tall on Java Edition and 5 blocks on Bedrock, but I'm only going to be talking about Java. I mentioned this a long time ago in a video, but despite sugarcane being able to naturally generate to 4 blocks tall, strangely, the Minecraft wiki says that sugarcane can actually generate up to any number of blocks tall. But nowhere online has anybody ever found a sugarcane taller than 4 blocks on Java Edition, and there's a good reason for that. The chances of a sugarcane growing taller than 4 blocks is so unlikely and complicated that even seed finders haven't bothered to search for it. For comparison, people have randomly found 7 and 8 block tall cacti cacti in their worlds without searching for them. But no one in history has ever reported an abnormally tall sugarcane in their world, besides online rumors and fake seeds. So how do we know that sugarcane can generate more than 4 blocks high? Well, in May of 2023, a person called the Master Caver analyzed the code for sugarcane generation and posted his findings to the Minecraft forums. What he found was that the game always checks whether a valid block can generate sugarcane next to water. These valid blocks include sand and dirt, but what's interesting is that sugarcane can actually generate on top of sugarcane, but only if there's water right next to it. Previously, I talked about how this could be possible to happen next to a waterfall, and many people told me sugarcane can't naturally generate next to flowing water. So initially, I thought this may be impossible, but after doing some more research, I found that there's still an extremely rare way that this can happen. But there's some information we need to know about sugarcanes first. Firstly, sugarcanes have a 6 times higher chance of generating in desert biomes, so that would be the ideal place to find this. And secondly, sugarcanes don't get broken in water, which is important. So, what you'd need for this to happen is 2 bodies of water that are on different Y levels and an extremely tiny chance for a sugarcane to grow in between them. And then the top of that sugarcane must be right next to a water source block. I searched for a few hours in a desert-only world to confirm these conditions are possible, and I managed to find an instance of a sugarcane growing near 2 bodies of water. You can see how the sugarcane isn't actually destroyed by the flowing water, which proves that this concept is possible. By the way, even finding this single sugarcane next to these different water levels was extremely rare, and it took about 3 hours of searching. So imagine the chances for a sugarcane to be in the perfect position and then have another one grow on top of it. You can see why no seed finder has ever attempted to find this, but it is theoretically possible. What's interesting is that despite no one in history finding a tall sugarcane, this is still more feasible to find than any of the other occurrences in this video. But if we're talking about 3 or more sugarcanes stacking to make a 12-block sugarcane, the chances of that occurring would be so exponentially unlikely that it's possibly just as rare as everything else in this video. But who knows, maybe one day people will try and find this. But for now, tall sugarcane will remain as urban legends on the internet. Despite everything so far being almost impossibly rare, they're all everyday occurrences compared to this next one. This is arguably the craziest limit of Minecraft's world generation, and that's generating a world that's only a single biome. And I'm not talking about the single biome option, but rather a world that by chance happened to generate a giant biome that stretches 60 million blocks across the whole world. Now the chances of this are so rare that it borders on impossible, and there are actually different levels to this. Firstly would be the chances of a common biome like a forest filling the entire world, but what would be the chance of an extremely rare biome like the Mushroom Island to be as big as a Minecraft world? Well, DamnDuck did the calculations, and generating a world that's only a mushroom island is this number, which is already incomprehensible, and his computer even crashed when calculating it because he accidentally set it to give the full number rather than the scientific notation. But then I also asked him what the chances would be for the whole world to be a modified jungle edge biome, which was once the rarest biome that only covered 1/1,000,000th of the overworld. The theoretical chances of a world being only a modified jungle edge is a 1 times 10 to the power of 21 quadrillion 600 trillion. What that means is that this is a 1 out of 10 chance with 21 quadrillion 600 trillion zeros on the end. If you were to try and read out the percentage of this with all its zeros, like saying 0.00% chance, assuming each zero took you a second to read, it would take you about 685 million years to read the full percentage of this happening. So this event is so unlikely to happen that even reading out the chances is beyond human comprehension. So at this point, this number is more of a conceptual idea rather than an actual possibility. When breaking an oak leaf, we all know that there's a 1 in 200 chance of it dropping an apple. And that's pretty common, right? But how rare would it be for every leaf on an oak tree to drop an apple? Well, on average, oak trees have about 50 leaves on them. So we need the probability of an apple dropping from a leaf 50 times in a row, which would be a 1 out of 200 to the power of 50 chance, which if we put into a scientific calculator equals to an 8.88 times 10 to the power of negative 116 chance. What that means is, for an apple tree like this to happen, there's a 0.115 zeros 888% chance. And this possibility is so rare that I doubt even CanMan18 can think of something rarer than this. Now, let's move on to something else that no one's ever found, and that's the rarest theoretical fishing loot in Minecraft. And no, I'm not talking about the 0.1% chance to catch 10 ink sacks at once, because you all know that would be far too common for this video. Not many people know that while fishing, you can catch something so rare that no one's ever caught it before in Minecraft history, because you'd never know this exists exists simply by looking at the loot table. The item I'm talking about is an enchanted book, but not just any enchanted book, because normal enchanted books aren't rare to fish and have a 16% chance to be fished from the treasure category. What I'm talking about is an enchanted book that's so rare and overpowered, most people don't even know it exists. What makes this enchanted book so abnormal is the fact that it has 12 different maximum enchantments on it. But no one's ever talked about this enchanted book online because it's so rare that no one has ever fished it, and most likely no one will ever fish it naturally in Minecraft. So how do we even know this theoretical book exists? Well, it all started recently when a user on my Discord server named Sam asked the question of what the best possible enchanted book from fishing was. To my knowledge, no one had ever wondered that before, including myself, because I just assumed it was a random enchantment that you get from each book. Sam also showed that they'd once fished an enchanted book with 5 enchantments on it. So after I saw that, I was also curious about what the best enchanted book was, but I didn't have the knowledge to answer that question myself. So I went to the only person I could think of that could answer it, the legendary seed finder called Chris, who's an expert on these sorts of things. For context, Chris once used code to find some insane things in Minecraft, such as a stronghold chest with a book that had 10 enchantments on it, which I talked about in a previous video that you can watch afterwards. But anyway, if there was one person who knew Minecraft's code well enough to find the rarest book from fishing, it was Chris. So when I asked Chris about this, he told me that enchanted books from fishing work similarly to enchanted books from stronghold chests, meaning that the books get a level 30 enchantment with no limit to the number of enchantments. But it still gets exponentially rarer to find books with multiple enchantments on them. That means that theoretically an enchanted book could exist with an insane amount of enchantments. But the question was, how would we even confirm such a thing is possible? Or even find the chances of it happening? Well, luckily Chris had an answer to that. How a fishing rod determines what enchantments you get from a book is somewhat random. On the surface, there's a loot table for fishing items, but there are actually predetermined combinations of this loot table called loot seeds. So when you fish, you're not directly getting something random from the loot table, but you're actually getting one of the predetermined loot seeds, which is made up of a combination of the loot table, which is also what happens with stronghold chests as well. So Chris ran his code to search through every possible loot sequence for fishing in Minecraft, and what he found was insane. Out of the 2 to the power of 48 possible loot seeds that exist for fishing, there's only one in existence that can pull this insane book, which has 12 enchantments on it. Chris confirms that this book does exist, but there's only a 1 out of 2 to the power of 48 chance to catch it while fishing, and that's only by using a fishing rod with luck of the seed 2, and in a version below 1.18, because loot seeds for fishing were changed after that update. So because fishing this book randomly is less than a 1 out of 281 trillion chance, that means the only person who has a feasible chance of finding this is dreaming his next manhunt. But anyway, did you know chickens can be extremely rare as well? I'm not even joking. Some of you probably already know that whenever you throw an egg, there's a 1 out of 256 chance of 4 chickens hatching from it at the same time. This occurrence is already uncommon, but what would be the chance of you throwing a whole stack of 16 eggs and each one hatching 4 chickens each? Well, what we need to do is find the probability of 1 out of 256 to the power of 16, and that equals to a 2.94 times 10 to the power of negative 39 chance, meaning there's a 0.390's 294 chance of this happening. But let's move on to some other things in Minecraft that are almost impossibly rare. UUIDs are randomly generated strings of text that are unique to each Minecraft account, and you can see yours on websites like NameMC. In one of my previous videos, I showed some rare UUIDs that exist within Minecraft's database, such as the account named Phantom, which has the only Minecraft UUID with 9 consecutive numbers in a row, which is already almost impossibly rare, but theoretically, this can get even rarer. So what's the rarest possible UUID in Minecraft? In the future, could a UUID exist that spells long words and sentences? Well, to find that out, we need to know how UUIDs are generated in the first place. UUIDs are 36 characters long and are always hexadecimal, meaning they use numbers from 0 to 9 and only use the letters from A to F, rather than the whole alphabet. So it's still possible for them to spell words by using these letters, but it kind of limits the amount of words that are possible. So UUIDs are completely random except for the metadata showing the version and variant. For example, you can see that every valid UUID should have the number 4 as the 13th character, because Minecraft uses version 4 UUIDs. So in my other video, there's already people who've reported their UUIDs spelling small words, such as someone who found the word B in their ID. But in reality, there aren't that many combinations that can make long words. For example, the longest words you can make by only using the letters A, B, C, D, E, F are facade, decade, decaf, and the longest one is defaced with 7 letters. As for sentences, there could be a UUID that spells out effaced defaced, which is a sentence that makes sense. I'm sure there's many other sentences and word combinations that can be made, and if you can think of any, let us all know in the comments. But the rarest possible UUID would be for the whole thing to be 36 4s all in a a row. We can actually work out the probability of this happening by seeing the possibility of each number and letter appearing in the UUID. So we know there are 16 different characters that can appear in UUIDs, being the numbers from 0 to 9 and the letters A to F. The 13th spot of the UUID is already predetermined to be a 4, so we can count that out already. So that means we just have to hope that the number 4 appears 35 times in a row. So we would need a 1 out of 16 to the power of 35 chance, which is 7.17 times 10 to the power of negative 43, which is a 0.4300717% chance. When creating a new Minecraft world, it's theoretically possible for you to spawn inside the end dimension. That's because there's a 1 in a trillion chance for an end portal to naturally generate with all 12 eyes of Ender. But it's also possible for the portal room to be exposed, and there's also a small chance for a ruined portal to generate on top of it as well, removing the stone bricks. Meaning if you manage to spawn in this exact position, then the moment you enter the world, you'll be instantly teleported into the end. Minecraft is full of random possibilities like this. Everything from mob spawning to world generation and even in-game events are all completely random. But in this video, we're taking a look at things that are technically possible within the game, but are too rare to ever happen. Most people know when it rains in Minecraft, there's a small chance for it to turn into a thunderstorm. But during thunderstorms, there's a 1 in 100,000 chance for lightning to strike each chunk in render distance. The game checks for this 20 times per second, meaning it's possible for lightning to constantly strike the ground and kill everything in its path. Feels like the sort of thing you'd see in a horror mod before Herobrine appears. It's also possible for lightning to always strike the block you're standing on, meaning no matter how much you try and escape, you could be hunted down and even spawn killed by lightning. So yeah, there's a slight chance the game can be unplayable. Thank you, Mojang. But this is nothing compared to what else is possible in this game. When shooting an arrow, you'll notice it never lands in the exact same spot, even if you shoot it from the same position. That's because projectiles have a tiny random spread, which is called a Gaussian distribution. So whenever you shoot an arrow, it can technically go in any direction, but it's just more likely to go where you're aiming. As you can see, 68% of arrows will land within 1 degree of where you aim, 95% will stay within 2 degrees, and over 99% of the shots you take will stay within 3 degrees of the angle you shot. But if we look at the limits of what's possible, there's a 1 in 500 million chance of the arrow going 6 degrees away from where you shot it. But believe it or not, there's also an extremely small chance that when you shoot a bow, the arrow gets shot behind you. But this only has a 1 out of 10 to the power of 3,863 chance of happening. That's a 0.3863 zeros 1% chance. We're talking about cosmic levels of possibility here. There hasn't been anything this rare that's ever happened in the history of the universe. And the only proof that it can even happen is from the source code, which was discovered by my friend Hepe. So shout out to him. Just imagine you somehow managed to do this on a server. You'd probably get banned for hacking. Now, something else that's affected by probability are crops. These grow randomly using the game's random tick speed, which is the rate of change that happens in your Minecraft world. So if you're lucky, when you plant crops, there's a chance they'll grow instantly. However, if you're not so lucky, it's possible for them to never grow at all. So the game can either be nice to you or straight up give you a famine. These are already unbelievably rare possibilities, but world generation can get even more abnormal. Every tree in a forest has a 0.2% chance of generating with a beehive. That means you can find an entire forest full of bees, turning this peaceful biome into a very dangerous place if you accidentally hit one. And although this isn't game breaking, I guess you could say it's beyond rare. Alright, that was pretty bad. But another biome that can have something rare is the desert, because we all know cacti usually generate between 1 and 3 blocks tall. However, in rare cases, cacti can stack on top of each other and grow much taller. So it's technically possible for an entire desert to only generate with tall cacti. This just feels very unnatural and even a bit creepy, like there's some sort of strange skyscrapers. But to make it even weirder, dead bushes also generate randomly, so it's possible for lines of dead bushes to go across the entire desert. This world generation is already beyond the scope of anything that can be humanly found, but we can push things even further. Every village generates in an 8x8 chunk radius from the center. However, there's no real limit as to how many houses a village can have. have, so long as they're all connected to paths. So it's technically possible for a village to have 100 houses, making it feel like a mini city. But there's also a small chance for each house to be a blacksmith, and each blacksmith can have the rarest possible loot, which is a chest with 21 diamonds. So this village would have over 2,000 diamonds in all its chests. I guess we can call this the Federal Reserve, or maybe it's some sort of money laundering operation. Now how about we take a look at the rarest mobs possible, and we'll start off with this Enderman. We all know that Endermen can pick up and place down grass blocks, but because this is random, it's possible for an Enderman to use those blocks to communicate with you in real life. For example, if I say hello to this Enderman, through sheer possibility, there's a chance the Enderman can actually respond using the grass to write hi back. The odds of this happening would literally break the fabric of space and time, but it's still mathematically possible. And wait, it looks like the Enderman's trying to say something else. Subscribe. Wow, thank you, theoretical Enderman. However, you may know the true rarest mob to be this: a left-handed baby zombie villager jockey with full diamond armor, iron sword, and max enchantments. Some have nicknamed this mob 4.3797E minus 75% because that's the chance for it to spawn. Yes, this is so rare we're using scientific notation to describe the chance of finding it. But in simple terms, it has a 1 out of 163 quadrillion chance of spawning. And this thing is so powerful it could probably break out of a mob farm if left unattended. And this can actually kill an iron golem single-handedly. At this point, we're reaching possibilities beyond human comprehension. You could run Minecraft until the end of time, and these things will still never happen. However, there's another mob which is nearly impossible to find. In the Nether, Striders have a 1 in 10 chance to stack on top of other Striders. However, in certain versions of the game, there's no limit to the number of Striders that can stack. That means a stack of 3 Striders has a 1 in 100 chance of spawning, and a stack of 4 has a 1 in 1,000. But it's possible to find a stack that goes from lava level all the way to the top of the Nether, which would be a stack of about 50 Striders. This event only has this small chance of happening. Now just imagine this happens with every Strider that spawns. I'm not even gonna try and guess how rare this is, since at this point it's borderline impossible. Speaking of the Nether, you know how you'll sometimes find these big lava lakes? Well, since world generation is random, there's a chance for the entire Nether to be one big lava ocean with no other biomes, meaning you'd have to bridge thousands of blocks to even find a fortress. Yeah, at that point, I'd rather just make a new world. Now, what if I told you there's a chance you'll never know the real name of the game? Because there's a 1 in 10,000 chance the title screen says Minecraft instead of Minecraft. Meaning, if that chance always happened to some kid who didn't know any better, they could go for a long time thinking it's actually called Minecraft, which would lead to some awkward conversations if they brought it up with their friends. It's also possible for something to happen that makes Minecraft impossible to beat. When you kill a blaze, there's a 50% chance for you to get a blaze rod. However, it's possible for every blaze you kill to simply not drop any rods. And even with looting 3, there's only a 91% chance to get a blaze rod. So if you're just really unlucky, there's a chance you're soft locked with no way to beat the game. But even worse than a soft lock, there's a chance for a certain mob to crash your game. If you didn't know, every second baby pandas have a 1 in 300 chance of sneezing. And when they sneeze, they have a 1 in 700 chance of dropping a slime ball. So it's theoretically possible to find a jungle with so many baby pandas that all keep spamming slime balls to eventually crash your game. Oh my PC. We've seen a lot of unlucky things that can happen in Minecraft, but let's take a look at one of the luckiest occurrences possible. Each chunk in desert and swamp biomes has a 1 in 64 chance to generate a fossil. However, each bone from the fossil also has a 10% chance of being replaced with diamonds, meaning you could theoretically find a fossil that's purely made of diamonds. But speaking of diamonds, what's the biggest diamond vein that can exist? Well, according to this YouTuber, it's possible to have up to 53 diamond ore in a single chunk, and that can bridge from one chunk to another, repeating all across the world. And if every fossil in this world was the biggest size possible and made of pure diamonds, it would make a single connected diamond vein of 849.5 trillion diamonds. So I can see where that blacksmith village got their diamonds from. Now let me ask you a question. If you were teleported to the edge of the world border and your friend was teleported to the other side with no communication, no coordinates, and only walking, what's the theoretical theoretical chance that you two will ever meet? Well, the Minecraft world's 60 million by 60 million blocks across, meaning it has a surface of 3.6 quadrillion blocks, which is over 7 times bigger than Earth. If you both had a render distance of 12, it would take tens of millions of years of randomly walking to even get within render distance of each other. But factoring in the mountains, forests, and caves, it could take hundreds of millions of years to actually meet. Not to mention the Nether, which has even more space. So what you'd want to do is go to a stronghold and wait for the other person in the end dimension, because that's the only place you'll ever find them. But speaking of the end dimension, every end island generates with a random amount of endstone, with the smallest islands having no endstone, and the biggest known ones having millions of blocks. But believe it or not, according to the game's code, there's no limit to how big an end island can be, meaning it's theoretically possible for an end island to be so big it covers the entire 1,000 block gap between the main island and the outer islands. This looks like a super flat world of endstone, and no chorus fruit can even grow here, making it look completely different from anywhere else in the game. Now at the center of the end island, we all know there are 10 pillars that always spawn around the exit portal. These pillars are randomly generated, with the tallest possible reaching Y level 103. However, the smallest pillars only go up to Y76. That means it's possible for all the end pillars to be the exact same height, and all be the smallest, making this the easiest dragon fight ever. However, the tallest that endstone can generate on the end island is up to Y75, so if the whole island managed to generate endstone at the highest level with only the smallest pillars, it's possible for you to directly hit the end crystals by hand, which feels very illegal. And honestly, this is starting to feel like a knockoff Minecraft game at this point. And as you can imagine, the chance of the end actually generating like this is next to zero. All the things we've seen are astronomically unlikely to happen. However, the rarest possible event in all of Minecraft is a rogue enderman picking up grass blocks and somehow making this strange structure. This is the biggest vein of ancient debris that's possible in Minecraft, because each chunk in the Nether can generate up to 5 ancient debris. But if 4 chunks all generate this at the very corner, you can get a vein of 20 ancient debris. But this is so rare that a mathematician on an old Reddit post estimated there's only a 9% chance of this vein existing in all of Minecraft. Now get ready, because we're about to see some more theoretically possible things like this. Events that can happen within Minecraft, but will likely never be found. Every stronghold generates with random patterns of stone bricks, mossy bricks, and infested bricks. These patterns are always different in every stronghold, except for some small sections that will always be normal stone bricks. That means it's technically possible to find a stronghold that's almost purely made of infested stone bricks. So when you break a single block, the entire structure starts falling apart around you as silverfish spawn, like you've stepped on some sort of landmine. It's also possible for the stronghold to be made entirely of mossy stone bricks, giving it an ancient appearance that you'd never normally see. However, the chance of this happening is so rare, there's probably not enough strongholds in existence to find this. But speaking of structures, a player by the name of Fanda created a Discord bot that tells you the chance of finding rare loot in structures. For example, in Nether fortresses, there's a 1 in 13 chance to find obsidian in a chest. However, the rarest possible fortress chest has 16 obsidian, as this only happens once every 431 million chests, and it's impossible to find any more than this. But loot can get even rarer, because in end cities, one of the rarest possible chests is this one, with 6 pieces of diamond horse armor, which only has a 1 in 1.8 trillion chance of generating. But it's also possible to find an end city with 42 diamonds. However, this one only has a 1 in 5.6 trillion chance of happening. And believe it or not, this loot isn't even theoretical, because after doing some digging, I discovered that a few years ago, a seed finder by the name of Denreeds used code to find this end city, which actually has the 42 diamond chest. But this is a rare anomaly for a different video. However, this doesn't even come close to the rarest theoretical chest of all time, which is a ruined portal with 8 enchanted golden apples, with a chance of finding this being 3.1766 times 10 to the power of minus 20%, or a 1 in 3.1 sextillion chance, which is so rare it goes beyond the number of chests that even exist in Minecraft. But fun fact, the most gapples ever found in a ruined portal is in this chest, discovered by a seed finder named Xinyu, that has 5 enchanted golden apples, which is a 1 in 597 billion chance. And this seed also has another chest with 5 gapples in the same coordinates in the nether. So yeah, seed finders are insane. All these possibilities are astronomically rare, but there's another occurrence which actually has a feasible chance of existing. Trial chambers always generate with at least a gap of 12 chunks between themselves and other trial chambers. And since most trial chambers don't extend more than 80 blocks across on one axis from their spawn point, it means that 2 trial chambers will never intersect. However, a player by the name of M33 Galaxy used code to simulate Minecraft's world generation and discovered it is possible for 2 trial chambers to be big enough to intersect. But the chance of this happening is at least a 1 in billions. However, there are countless trial chambers across all seeds, so this definitely exists somewhere out there, and he's currently using code to search for it, with the closest trial chambers he found being only 23 blocks apart, so I'll keep you all updated. But honestly, a 1 in billions chance is far too common for this video, so let's take a look at an even more rare occurrence. We all know there's a 1 in a trillion chance for an end portal to have 12 Eyes of Ender, which automatically activates it with no player intervention. However, not many people know that if an end portal generates at just the right location, there's a chance it can spawn with all 12 eyes without being activated. This is because of a rare glitch in the population chunk border, making the game think there's 2 portals instead of 1, a portal with 9 eyes and one with 3 eyes. However, this phenomenon is so unknown that it's only ever been documented once on this seed, but that means it's technically possible for a world to exist where all the end portals somehow generate glitched like this, making it so that you can't enter the end. Just imagine giving this seed to a speedrunner and making them think they're going insane when they see the end portals. But there's also other ways the game can be annoying, such as when a zombie spawns, it has between a 0 to 10% chance to summon reinforcements. That's why when you hit a zombie, you'll sometimes notice other zombies spawning out of nowhere. It's also technically possible that when a zombie calls for reinforcements, every single zombie that gets summoned can also spawn reinforcements, creating an endless wave of mobs that you have to deal with. But this still isn't as bad as what can happen with Drowned. You know when you're trying to loot ocean ruins and get ambushed by a group of these guys? Well, it's pretty annoying, right? But what would make it 100 times worse is if every Drowned that spawned had a trident, which would make swimming feel like getting shot at with machine guns. Not to mention if they all had the best enchantments on their tridents. Just look at how quickly they can go through my shield. In a matter of seconds, it's gone. These possibilities already go beyond the bounds of reality and will never happen in history. But to go even further into the realm of possibility, let's take a look at pillager outposts. Outposts usually generate with a few surrounding structures, such as tents, scarecrows, and cages, with a current record for the most surrounding structures being on this seed with 15 in total. However, a technical player called Andrew looked at the source code and found the maximum surrounding structures an outpost can have is 45. So it's possible to find an outpost with 45 iron golem cages. Like you've just found an army that's been captured. There's also a chance that instead of iron golems, each structure is a pair of scarecrows, making this outpost feel very unnatural and creepy. But according to Andrew, this occurrence is nearly impossible to happen because of collisions between the structures. But now let's move on to the next occurrence, which is the rarest theoretical death in Minecraft. Hey guys, if you've watched up until this point, make sure to comment theoretical baguette to confuse everyone else in the comments. Now back to the video. The maximum number of mobs that can spawn at once in single player is 70, and they're all usually spread out across a large area. However, if about 30 of those mobs came to one location, a mechanic called entity cramming will make them take damage as they're all squished together. For this to happen naturally in your world is almost impossible, but if you're very unlucky, there's a chance that all 70 mobs that spawn are Endermen, and they all keep teleporting directly on top of you, instantly killing you with entity cramming. And this can just keep happening over and over until you quit the game. So thank you, Mojang. This is literally unplayable. Now moving on, in jungles, there's something that can happen to trees which is incredibly rare. Every small jungle tree has a 20% chance to be classified as a cocoa tree, and each wood block on that tree also has a 25% chance to generate cocoa beans on each exposed side, as long as it's within within 3 blocks of the bottom of the tree. That means each side of a jungle tree can generate 3 cocoa beans each, and the maximum beans on a tree is 12. This was calculated by one of Minecraft's smartest players called Xapple through analyzing the source code. However, this only has a 1 in 83 million chance of generating, but at least you can make a lot of hot chocolate with all these cocoa beans. If hot chocolate was actually in the game. Thanks again, Mojang. Literally unplayable. Where's the hot chocolate? But now that we've seen this fabled tree, let's move on and go deep underground. At the bottom of every Minecraft world, bedrock spawns in a randomly generated pattern to prevent players from falling out of the world. In total, there's 5 layers where bedrock can generate, but the game places it in uneven shapes and heights, so no 2 worlds will have exactly the same pattern. However, with the randomness of the bedrock, it's possible for a world to exist where there's no bedrock anywhere except for the bottom layer, making this feel like a budget super flat world. It's also possible for the opposite to happen, where all 5 layers are filled with bedrock, which really doesn't look any different from the top. But anyway, now let me tell you a little known fact about Minecraft. Back in 2010, up until beta 1.7, for some reason your spawn point was always on sand, because it was the only valid spawn block. No matter how many times you made new worlds, there would always be sand beneath your feet. But a player called Nels discovered that theoretically, if someone found a seed where there was no sand in the spawn area, it's possible for you to become stuck in the loading screen forever, as the game couldn't find a place to spawn you. So thanks again, Mojang, really making the game unplayable from the start, huh? But anyway, this same person who found this sand possibility did some more research into the source code and discovered something else that's theoretically possible. When you cure a zombie villager, it usually takes between 3 to 5 minutes to turn into a normal villager. However, not many people know that iron bars and beds within an 8x8 area each have a 30% chance of speeding up the conversion time by an extra tick, and this can happen up to 14 times per tick. But the game only does this check 1% of the time, and even if it chooses the absolute fastest base time of 3 minutes, you'd still need that 1% chance to succeed for 224 ticks in a row. However, if that happened with a zombie villager in an area fully covered with iron bars, there's a chance for the villager to be healed in only 12 seconds. But the odds of this happening are only a 1 in 4 times 10 to the power of 484 chance. At this point, it feels less like curing a villager and more like doing some sort of forbidden ritual. But if you thought that was crazy, let me introduce you to the rarest enchanted book. You might remember in a past video, I talked about how it was possible to use a fishing rod to catch an enchanted book with 12 enchantments, which is already insane to look at. However, in newer versions, the fishing RNG uses a completely different algorithm called Xero, which can now have much rarer occurrences than before. And with this new RNG, a player by the name of Chris calculated how many fishing states are possible for enchanted books with different numbers of enchantments. For example, there are 2.59 times 10 to the power of 37 possible fishing states that can catch a book with 1 enchantment. And as you can see, this is very common. But to catch a book with 10 enchantments, there are 3.33 times 10 to the power of 26 possible states where that can happen. And this is still a huge number. However, to catch a book with 21 enchantments, there are 68.3 million possible states. And you can now see the chances are getting rarer and rarer the more enchantments a book has. For a book with 25 enchants, there are only 10.9 possible states out of all fishing catches, making this the realistic limit for how many enchants a book can have. But if we go further past this point, we get into the realm of true theoretical possibilities. There are only 0.000000874 possible fishing states that can catch a book with 28 enchantments. Yes, that's a microscopic fraction of a fishing state. But the theoretical limit is finding a book with 30 total enchantments, or as I like to call it, the Bible. There are only 3.50 times 10 to the power of -8 states that can catch this, which is a number so small it goes beyond the limits of possibility itself. That would be like fishing up a book that has almost every enchantment in Minecraft, which is so rare we need some of the world's smartest scientists to even calculate how to crack the Xero algorithm and find it. So yeah, this is about as rare as you being subscribed to this channel. Please subscribe, guys. guys, we need 100,000. But now let's take a look at a very strange ruined portal. Ruined portals generate in many different shapes and sizes. However, you'll notice some obsidian is replaced with crying obsidian, which happens approximately 15% of the time. The biggest portal size has 31 obsidian blocks, but the chance for all of them to be crying obsidian is only a 1 in 347 quadrillion chance. However, because of all the ruined portals across every Minecraft seed, this actually has a feasible chance of existing, but of course it would be nearly impossible to find. But this portal is also completely useless, so if you're looking for it, congratulations, you just wasted your whole life searching for a portal that can't even light. But now let's enter the Nether, because there are some very weird things that can happen here as well. In Nether fortresses, a rare glitch makes it possible for blaze spawners to stack on top of each other. In fact, only one seed has ever been found where this happens, but it's technically possible for multiple Nether fortresses to overlap and all their blaze spawners stack on top of each other, creating a massive blaze tower, which feels like some sort of boss level. It's also possible to find a fortress with a hallway that never ends, since if multiple fortresses have perfectly overlapping hallways, it would just go on forever until the world border. So we've got ourselves a natural highway system. But now, if you make a portal to the overworld and go through it, it's possible for a zombie piglin to go through it as well. And each time a mob goes through the portal, the chunks on the other side are loaded for 15 seconds. So it's possible for zombie piglins to keep coming through the portal and flooding the overworld until they hit the mob cap and then go back through the portal again to keep the chunks loaded infinitely. I have no idea why they would do that, but it would be a very strange sight. Moving on from the Nether, let's enter the End Dimension to see the rarest end city ever. In the past, seeds have been found where two end ships from different end cities have crashed into each other and even dropped the elytra. But it's theoretically possible for this to happen to 4 end cities with 4 different ships crashing into each other. There's also a chance for all the end cities to generate on the highest points possible, which is on endstone at Y level 75. This makes it feel like some sort of war is going on and the end cities are meeting in the middle for negotiations. But before things get too heated, let's get away from this situation and go further out into the end. You know these small islands that generate randomly between the big islands? Well, it's technically possible to find a section of the end where all the space between the big islands is filled with small islands. And they're so close together that you can literally parkour between them. So I guess we can call this rip-off parkour civilization. Now let me show you something even cooler. If you throw an item inside the end gateway after beating the dragon, it force loads a 3x3 chunk area on the other side. But if the gateway appears in an area where 2 end ships have crashed into each other and the item frame with the elytra is broken with perfect velocity, it's possible that when you drop an item in the gateway, it loads the chunks and the elytra falls perfectly into the gateway and gets teleported straight onto the main island. So you can get an elytra without needing to travel to the outer islands. This was calculated to be possible by the legendary seed finder M33 Galaxy. However, he says this occurrence is so rare that it's likely no seed exists with it. But something else that M33 Galaxy found is that in versions between 1.18 and 1.20, there's a chance for you to spawn in mid-air on Java Edition, which is something that should never happen on any seed. The only way this is possible is if the 11x11 chunk radius within the spawn region is only water or lava below sea level. And if that happens, you'll always spawn in the air at Y65. This can only exist if a seed is found with a giant exposed cave. But now, going back into the end, on older versions before the 1.9 update, the end pillars didn't generate in a circle around the exit portal. Instead, they were all scattered randomly across the island. So it's technically possible to find an end island with no pillars whatsoever on old versions. And I'm guessing the dragon must be pretty angry about that one. But anyway, going back to modern versions, when you throw an ender pearl, there's a 5% chance for an endermite to spawn. This mob isn't usually too bad on its own, but if the game wanted to be annoying, there's a chance that every single ender pearl that you throw for the rest of your life spawns an endermite, which in some situations is straight up a death trap. Come on Mojang, this is so unplayable. Alright, now let's pretend we can leave Minecraft running for billions of years. In a seed where the end portal is already completed, it's possible for endermen to randomly carry blocks from the overworld and bring them into the end. And if they happen to build staircases all the way up to the end crystals, it's possible for a skeleton to randomly enter the end from the portal and get attacked by the dragon. The skeleton could get angry at the dragon and shoot at it but miss, accidentally hitting the end end crystals and destroying them. Then it's possible for this to repeat with multiple skeletons hitting the dragon, and since it can't regenerate, it can kill it, meaning it's theoretically possible for mobs to beat the game by themselves. So I guess we can call this the rarest speedrun in Minecraft. Everything we've seen so far is astronomically unlikely to happen, but there are things possible that go beyond our understanding of reality itself. A bit is the smallest unit of data stored in a computer, and bits can only be in one of two states, 0 or 1. Every file, including Minecraft worlds, are built by long sequences of bits, and computers usually flip bits billions of times per second as part of normal processing. However, in very rare cases, bits can flip on their own because of things like electrical instability, and even energy particles from the sun's rays can strike memory cells and change their electrical charge, causing bits to flip. These unintended flips can corrupt files, crash programs, or even slightly alter stored data. However, through sheer possibility, there's a chance for all the bits in your computer to be perfectly flipped, causing Minecraft's data to be changed in such a way to make the game downgrade versions. Yes, it's possible for you to click on the latest release and end up playing version 1.0. It's also possible for the perfect sequence of bit flipping to change Minecraft's data into an update that Mojang hasn't even released yet. So whenever you play, there's a slight chance you could get the end update before anyone else. However, this is so unfathomably rare that the estimated chance of it happening is a 1 out of 10 to the power of minus 3.01 times 10 to the power of 12, which would break the entire universe if it actually happened. But this is child's play compared to what else is possible. But this next one is so rare that we need to travel beyond the curvature of space and time to even comprehend it. So I hope you know your quantum physics. Quantum fluctuations are tiny changes in energy that occur everywhere in empty space. They constantly create and destroy microscopic variations in particle fields, but only on very small scales. These fluctuations can slightly disturb individual particles. However, from a statistical viewpoint, if we consider the space of all possible arrangements of particles in the universe, it's theoretically possible for a configuration to exist where every atom in your PC gets arranged with 79 protons in its nucleus, meaning there's a chance that while you're playing Minecraft, a spontaneous atomic reorganization can turn your PC into solid gold. But this is so improbable that it's best we don't even think about how rare it is. But despite this literally being one of the rarest occurrences in the universe, it's nothing compared to the true rarest thing in Minecraft, which is loading in a seed and randomly finding this strange structure. When you enter the end dimension, there's a chance the ender dragon is missing. That's because every mob in the game has a unique ID number called a UUID. However, you can't have two entities with the same ID on the same world. And since Minecraft players also have their own UUIDs, if the player and the ender dragon had the same ID, the dragon simply won't spawn, leaving you stuck inside the end dimension. But this is so rare, it only has a 1 in 5 undecillion chance of happening. Now let's move on and look at some more theoretically possible events like this, such as the perfect horse. Minecraft horses have 3 stats: speed, health, and jump height. These are always random, but what's the best horse you can theoretically find? Well, horse HP ranges from 7.5 to 15 hearts, so the best horse is sitting at a full 15, which is more than the health of a player. For speed, it ranges from 4.8 to 14.5 blocks per second, compared to a player's walking speed of 4.32 blocks per second. This horse is about 3.5 times faster, and for jump height, it ranges from 1.15 to 5.92 blocks high, meaning the best horse can clear almost a 6 block wall from a single jump. So how rare would it be to randomly find this perfect horse? Well, a Reddit user named Gadend did the calculations a few years ago and found there's a 1 in 124,000 chance of coming across this in the wild, which is already crazy. But another Reddit user pointed out the speed and jump stats aren't actually that simple, because for those, Minecraft chooses a random decimal, and since Java's random number generator has quadrillions of possible decimal values, the odds of it landing on the perfect stats are near 0. But what does this theoretical horse even look like in action? Well, here it is. As you can see, it's basically on steroids, being able to jump straight onto trees and run like the wind. Now that we've seen this legendary steed, let's move on to the Nether. Have you ever wondered what's the biggest possible glowstone cluster? We all know glowstone generates in clumps on the Nether roof, and over the years, many players have discovered giant veins with dozens of glowstone. But no one's ever talked about the theoretical limit. According to the code, glowstone generation runs up to 1,500 placement attempts per cluster, meaning mathematically the most you can find is a cluster of 1,501 glowstone, including the first block, which is honestly a bit creepy to look at, but the odds of this happening are around a 1 in 10 to the power of 200, which is so rare it's more likely for you to win the lottery tens of times in a row than find this. But while that's the theoretical limit of glowstone, what's the realistic amount that seed finders could actually search for? Well, it's probably a cluster in the 150 block range, estimated to be a 1 in 5 billion chance. And given how many glowstone veins exist across all seeds, something like this definitely exists somewhere out there. And there's probably a seed finder already writing a program to find it as we speak. Speaking of seed finders, you may remember in the previous video I showed that it was theoretically possible to find a nether portal made of pure crying obsidian. And since then, a seed finder named Faith discovered this ruined portal with all 17 of its obsidian being crying, which is a 1 in 102 trillion chance. And by using code, she also found this giant portal with 25 out of 31 obsidian being crying, which is a 1 in 1.4 quadrillion chance. So yeah, it goes to show these kinds of possibilities are basically challenges to seed finders. And if you're curious, the chance of finding a giant portal with all 31 of its obsidian being crying is a 1 in 72 septillion chance. So we can probably rule that out from being found anytime soon. But something else I found interesting, a Discord user named Everyone also pointed out that each netherrack from a ruined portal also has a 7% chance of generating as a magma block, meaning it's also theoretically possible to find a ruined portal with only magma blocks, which is so rare it has an approximate 0% chance of happening. Even rarer than that is you subscribing and getting this channel to 100,000 subs. But anyway, while this portal requires a huge amount of luck and processing power to find, let's move on to another possibility, which you may recognize from a short I made. If you create a new world while holding down the Alt key, you'll find a world type called debug mode. When you enter the world, you'll find yourself on a platform in the void with every block state in the game. Here, the world is frozen, mobs don't spawn, you can't break any blocks, and there's no rain whatsoever. But if you type the game rule command, you'll notice the weather cycle isn't actually turned off. So what's going on here? Well, a seed finder named Nels looked into the source code and discovered the debug world forces the game to pause for 1 billion ticks before the weather cycle begins. Meaning that theoretically, if you wait on this world for 1 year, 7 months, 1 day, and between 17 and 19 hours, it would naturally start raining. But the patience required for this is so insane that likely no one in history has witnessed this legitimately without turning up the tick speed. So there you go, the only theoretically possible event that you can actually witness for yourself, if you're unemployed enough to try. But now let's move on to a possibility that will probably never happen. We all know using tools takes up durability, and eventually they'll break, unless you have mending. However, with the unbreaking enchantment, it makes it less likely for you to use up durability on your weapons. So if you enchant a pickaxe with Unbreaking 1, it makes it so there's only a 50% chance for the tool to use up any durability. With Unbreaking 2, that drops to 33.3%. And with Unbreaking 3, only 25% of all hits will use up durability. That would make a diamond pickaxe go from 1,561 uses to an average of 6,244 uses. But if you're lucky, there's an astronomically low chance that the tool never uses up any durability. So you could go your entire life using the same pickaxe and tools without them ever breaking. So I guess this is the only time the Unbreaking enchantment is actually true to its name. But now let's dig down towards the stronghold. When you enter a library, each air block has a 7% chance of being replaced with a cobweb. Usually you'll only find around 30 webs per library. However, a seed finder by the name of Turtle Kid informed me that it's theoretically possible to find a library entirely filled with cobwebs, which only has a 0.07 to the power of 417 chance of happening. So you gotta wonder what kind of crazy spiders are living here. But on the flip side, it's also possible to find a library with no cobwebs at all. But even that only has this low chance of happening. So I guess we can call this the cleanest stronghold in Minecraft. Anyway, this isn't the only strange occurrence that can happen with structures, because did you know this is theoretically possible in vanilla Minecraft? What you're looking at is a flying mansion, an occurrence so rare it's never been seen before. Because over the years, many other floating structures have been found, such as jungle temples. Because when a piece of land generates in the sky, there's a chance for it to drag up structures to the average height of the highest point. However, the reason you can't find flying mansions this way is because they'll always stretch their cobblestone down to the ground. So the only way to find this as a flying structure would be to have the perfect platform of blocks generate in the sky, which would allow the mansion to spawn on top of them. However, a floating island of this size is rarer than you filling out a job application, so it's unlikely to be found anytime soon. But now let's take a look at something which can theoretically happen in the distant future. Before you even play Minecraft, you have to choose a username. Minecraft usernames are between 3 and 16 characters, and they're made of letters, numbers, and underscores, meaning there are 12.7 septillion possible combinations in existence. So if a new Minecraft account was made every second, it would take about 400 quadrillion years to run out of usernames, which is 28 million times the current age of the universe, and the sun would have already died several times over by the time we run out of usernames. So the good news is we'll have bigger things to worry about by then. Now let's look upwards at a strange shipwreck high above the clouds. We all know shipwrecks usually generate on beaches or oceans. However, on Bedrock Edition, there's a rare bug that sometimes makes shipwrecks generate 100 blocks higher in the sky. Many sightings of this have been found in the past, and it's unknown why this glitch happens. In fact, you can't even replicate it on the same seed. However, the Seed Finder Turtle Kid said it's theoretically possible that if a shipwreck generated on a floating island at Y level 210, it can get pushed up 100 blocks and end up at the height limit. But the chance of this happening is very unlikely, because even finding a shipwreck generating over Y200 is almost impossibly rare, let alone also having the bug that would make it generate 100 blocks higher. So if you ever find this, congratulations, you just came across the Flying Dutchman. Speaking of unnatural occurrences, let's go to the ground to see this rare tree. Azalea trees aren't too special, other than showing where lush caves are. However, you may know some of their leaves are sometimes replaced with flowering azalea leaves, with each leaf having a 25% chance of being flowering. And back in 2024, a seed finder named Tom calculated the odds for a tree with only flowering leaves, having a 6.2523e minus 55 chance. Yeah, sounds like an equation Einstein himself would have cooked up back in the day. So if you're ever out exploring and find an azalea tree, always check its leaves, because there's always a chance you could find this legendary tree. But anyway, there's something even crazier than this that you can theoretically find. When you make a new world, there's a small chance for you to spawn on top of the Skyblock Island. But wait, how is this possible? Well, several islands in the past have been found that look similar to Skyblock, and although a perfect replica has never been discovered, seed finders have confirmed that this is theoretically possible to happen. So if you found a world like this and turned on the bonus chest, it would look exactly like Skyblock. So if you're too lazy to load up the Skyblock map, there's always the small chance you'll just randomly find it in your world. Now, speaking of the sky, back in 2020, a player named MusicBite reported something that shouldn't be possible. A dungeon that's flying in mid-air, no ground beneath it and no cave walls around it. It was just completely floating. What made this even more interesting is, according to the Minecraft wiki, there's only been a single confirmed sighting of this occurrence in over 16 years. To this day, no one fully understands how this even generated, as dungeons usually spawn underground and very rarely near the surface, let alone flying in the sky. Apparently this screenshot was taken on Legacy Console Edition, so there's a chance this can't even happen on modern versions, as it could have just been some weird generation that was quietly patched without anyone noticing. So this is the only theoretically possible event that's already been found, but was never rediscovered, which makes it feel even more mysterious than anything else we've seen. But now that we've seen this, let's go back into the Nether. Did you know that every single bastion has a different amount of piglins and piglin brutes? Personally, I didn't know that until a seed finder called M33 Galaxy told me it's theoretically possible to find a bastion without any piglins at all, as well as a bastion without any piglin brutes. He even said you can find a hoglin stable without any hoglins, which is very strange to think about. M33 Galaxy didn't give the exact odds of finding this, but it's probably too rare for anyone to randomly stumble across. But it would make it much easier to raid the structure
structure without these guys. Now, M33 Galaxy also told me about another possible occurrence, this time in the end dimension. He said that the lowest an end ship can generate is at Y75, so if an outer end island also generated end stone at that level, you could find an end ship literally on the ground. But the rarest possible event is a Minecraft player touching grass, which is estimated to be a 1 in E equals MC squared chance.